The Whispering Wood did not suffer trespassers. Everyone in the 7 mortal kingdoms knew that. Mothers whispered it to children at bedtime. Travelers made wide circles around its silver-leafed border. The trees themselves seemed to lean hungrily over the old stone road, their branches like skeletal fingers waiting to snatch the unwary. Legend spoke of those who entered and were never seen again, or worse, who returned with their memories scoured clean, babbling about lights and music and a sorrow so deep it drowned the soul. Alara didn't care about the legends anymore. The sorrow was already inside her. It was a cold, hard stone lodged beneath her ribs, heavier with every step she took away from everything she had ever known. Her boots, soles worn thin to almost nothing, made no sound on the thick carpet of moss. Her cloak, once the vibrant blue of a summer sky, was now the gray of forgotten ashes. In her pack, she carried the pitiful remains of her old life, a half-empty water skin, a handful of crumbling whey bread, and a single small book of pressed wildflowers, its pages filled with the ghosts of meadows she would never see again. She was 22, but her eyes, the color of storm-touched earth, held the weariness of someone 3 times her age. Exile was a living death. It had been 7 months since the elders of Oakhaven had cast her out. The accusation still rang in her ears, sharp as shattering glass. Witchcraft, unnatural gifts, a blight disguised as a blessing. It had started innocently. A dying apple tree in the village square had burst into impossible fragrant bloom after she'd rested her hand against its blighted bark. A fever that had gripped 3 children broke after she'd hummed an old, wordless lullaby by their sick bed. The village had been grateful, at first. Then the fear set in. Fear of what they couldn't understand. Fear of her. In their eyes, her kindness became a curse, her gentle touch a threat. The final straw was the well. During the drought, when the old well gave nothing but dust, Alara had simply wished for water. She had knelt at the stone rim, placed her palms on the sun-baked ground, and begged the deep earth for mercy. By morning, it bubbled, cool and clear and endless. That was the miracle that sealed her fate. Gratitude had twisted into terror. They gave her until dawn to leave and told her never to return. She had walked without destination, a leaf tossed in a merciless wind. The Whispering Wood had not been her choice. Her feet, bloody and blistered, had simply carried her toward the one place no one would ever follow. The boundary was not a fence or a wall, but a feeling. The air grew cooler, sweeter. The bird song changed from cheerful chirps to something more melodic, more questioning. The light beneath the canopy shifted, caught in a perpetual, beautiful state between late afternoon and early twilight. She crossed that invisible line without a backward glance. The world of men, with its cruel judgments and small hearts, faded behind her like a bad dream. As the strange silver dusk of the wood deepened, exhaustion, her only constant companion, finally won. Her legs buckled in a small clearing where the roots of an enormous silver-barked tree formed a natural hollow, soft with moss and sheltered by overhanging fronds. It looked like a cradle made by the earth itself. With trembling hands, she managed to kindle a tiny fire from stubborn dry twigs, boiling water for a bitter tea of pine needles. The flames danced, casting long, swaying shadows that seemed to watch her. For the first time in months, the crushing fear eased to just a fraction. Here, there was no one to accuse her, no eyes full of hate. There was only the deep, breathing silence of the ancient trees. She felt a strange, fragile sense of peace. It was a trap, of course, the most beautiful one she had ever wandered into. She never sensed the watcher in the branches high above. Perched on a limb wider than a wagon, King Kalen of the Sylvan Vale observed the human girl with a piercing, silver-eyed gaze. He had held the throne for 400 years, and in all that time, no mortal had penetrated this deep into the Whispering Wood. The forest itself was the first and best guardian. It wove confusion into the minds of intruders, bent paths back upon themselves, and cast illusions of terrifying beasts to turn away the brave. Yet this fragile, sorrow-laden creature walked straight through every ward, every glimmer of misdirection, as if the trees had simply stepped aside for her. She moved with a heart-breaking caution, as if afraid to disturb the very air. She saw the way her fingers brushed a fern with something akin to reverence, the way her eyes closed in something like pain when the wind sighed through the leaves above. He should have summoned his guards the moment she crossed the border. He should have appeared before her in a flash of terrifying majesty and commanded her to leave. The laws of his people were clear, etched in sorrow and blood from centuries past. The veil was forbidden, protected, sealed away from the mortal realm for the safety of both. But he did not move. He was captivated. It was the sadness that clung to her, a palpable aura of loneliness that echoed his own deep within his ageless chest. He watched her extinguish her fire with meticulous care, scattering the ashes and smoothing the ground as if to leave no trace of her passage. He watched her curl into the root hollow, her threadbare cloak pulled tight, her breathing slowly evening out into sleep. She was utterly defenseless. And he, Kalen of the Silver Crown, found he could not look away. He told himself he was assessing the threat. He told himself he was waiting for hidden companions, for some sign of deception. But the truth, which whispered through him like a vine seeking sunlight, was simpler and far more dangerous. In her vulnerability, in her quiet grace, he saw a reflection of a loneliness so profound it had become the very foundation of his eternal reign. And so he remained, a silent sentinel in the silver-barked trees, keeping watch over a sleeping human girl as the stars wheeled slowly overhead and the whispering wood sang its ancient, secret songs. The night in the Whispering Wood was not a time of darkness, but of transformation. The silver bark of the trees began to emit a soft, phosphorescent glow, painting the clearing in shades of ghostly blue and milky white. Flowers that had been closed by day now opened their luminous petals, becoming tiny lanterns that dotted the mossy floor. The air hummed with a deeper, more resonant energy, the very magic of the place becoming more tangible as the moon rose, unseen through the thick canopy. High above, Kalen did not sleep. Elves did not need rest as mortals did, especially not one of the royal bloodline. He descended from his perch with the silent grace of falling snow, his feet making no impression on the soft earth. Clad in robes the color of a moonless night, embroidered with threads that shimmered like captured starlight, he was a piece of the shadows given form. His hair, the pale silver of a winter moon, fell straight to his shoulders. His face was all elegant, austere lines, a masterpiece of immortal craftsmanship. But his eyes were the true testament to his age. They were the color of a glacier, clear and cold and immeasurably deep, holding the weight of centuries. He moved closer to the sleeping girl, a statue coming to life. He knelt beside her root hollow, careful to stay beyond the circle of faint light she seemed to carry with her. This close, he could see the details the distance had obscured, the smudges of exhaustion beneath her eyes, the delicate, determined set of her jaw even in sleep, the way her dark chestnut hair fanned across the moss like a shadow. She murmured something in her sleep, a single heartbreaking word: home. The sound, so soft and full of longing, struck Kalen with a physical force. He had not heard that word spoken with such pure, unadulterated need, and he could not remember. His own home, the crystalline spires and living groves of the Sylvan Vale, was a prison of duty, a beautiful, silent tomb where his people slowly faded from the world, too weary of eternity to even grieve their own passing. As he watched, a single tear escaped the corner of Alara's closed eye, tracing a glistening path through the dirt on her cheek. An impulse, alien and terrifying in intensity, rose in him, to reach out and brush that tear away, to offer comfort. He clenched his hand into a fist, the muscles in his jaw tightening. What was he doing? This was madness. She was a mortal, a trespasser, a variable in the carefully balanced, stagnant equation of his kingdom. Yet, the forest itself seemed to contradict his cold logic. The great tree whose roots sheltered her pulsed with a gentle golden light where her body touched it. Tiny bioluminescent mosses were creeping toward her, as if drawn to her warmth. The whispering wood was not tolerating her presence, it was embracing it. That was impossible. The wood had rejected elven nobles of impeccable lineage for lesser slights. It did not welcome mortals. Unless... A theory, wild and unprecedented, began to form in Kielan's ancient mind. He focused his senses not on the physical girl, but on the aura around her. It was faint, a flickering candle next to the bonfire of his own power, but it was there. A signature of magic, not the learned, structured art of elven mages, but something older, wilder, and fundamentally green. It was the magic of growth, of healing, of deep root-tangled earth and sun-dappled leaves. It was the magic of the wood itself. The revelation should have calmed him. It provided a reason, however slim, for the forest's behavior. Instead, it coiled a new tension in his gut. If she carried the old, wild magic in her blood, however diluted, then she was not merely a lost human. She was a relic, a living fragment of a time when the boundaries between their worlds were less defined, and that made her infinitely more dangerous and infinitely more fascinating. A rustle in the undergrowth, too deliberate to be an animal, snapped his attention away. From the deeper gloom of the trees, two figures emerged. His guards, Kielan and Lyra, moved with lethal silence, their expressions etched with concern and disapproval. They bowed low. "My king," Kielan whispered, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "We have been absent from the Vale. We grew concerned." Lyra's sharp eyes darted to the sleeping Alara and back to her king. Her disapproval was a tangible chill in the air. "A trespasser, sire, and you have not removed her?" Kielan rose to his full height, the mantle of kingship settling back onto his shoulders like a physical weight. "She is no ordinary trespasser," he said, his voice low and leaving no room for question. "The wood welcomes her. She carries the old wild magic in her blood." The two guards exchanged a glance thick with disbelief. "That cannot be," Lyra insisted. "The last of the wild bloodlines faded millennia ago." "And yet the evidence sleeps before you," Kielan countered, a thread of iron in his whisper. "I will handle this. Return to the Vale. Speak of this to no one, not even the High Council." "My lord, the law," Kielan began. "The law was written to protect us from mortal greed and destruction," Kielan interrupted, his glacial eyes flashing. "Can you sense greed in her? Can you see destruction in her sleep? She is a wounded creature, nothing more. Now go." Reluctantly, with deep bows, the two elves melted back into the forest. Kielan was alone with the girl once more. The confrontation had decided him. Sending her away now, back into the human world that had shattered her, felt like an act of cruelty he could no longer commit. But bringing her into the Vale, that would stir a hornet's nest of political strife he had spent centuries avoiding. As the first hint of pearl-gray light began to filter through the leaves, Alara stirred. Kielan retreated several paces, blending into the dappled shadows of a thick tree trunk. He would allow her to wake naturally. He would observe her first actions, her first thoughts upon finding herself still alive in the legendary, deadly, whispering wood. Her reaction would tell him everything he needed to know. Alara's eyes flooded open. For a blissful moment, there was only the gentle light and the incredible deep sense of peace. Then memory crashed down. The clearing, the silver trees, the legends. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through her. She sat up so quickly the world spun. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She should be dead, or mad, or lost forever. But she wasn't. She was here, whole, and she felt better. The crushing exhaustion was gone, the ache in her bones had eased, the air smelled of rain and flowers, and something sweet she couldn't name. It was the most beautiful, most terrifying place she had ever seen. Her eyes darted around the clearing, searching for hidden threats. And that's when she saw it. Where she had buried her fire's embers, a circle of perfect white mushrooms had sprouted overnight, forming a fairy ring. And in the center of that ring, resting on a bed of velvety moss, was a single, perfect berry the color of dawn, plump and gleaming with dew. An offering, or a test. From his hidden vantage, Kaelin watched her stare at the berry, her emotions playing across her face like sunlight on water. Fear, wonder, desperate hunger, and finally a sad, resigned understanding. She believed it was a trick, a poison apple in a different form. He saw her swallow hard, saw her turn her face away from the temptation with a small, pained shake of her head. She would choose hunger over potential danger, a wise, heartbreaking choice. It was that small act of defiance against her own need that decided him completely. He stepped out of the shadows. The air in the clearing seemed to still. The gentle hum of the wood faded into a waiting silence. Alara's breath caught in her throat as the figure emerged between two silver trees. He was not human. He could never be mistaken for human. He was tall and regal, and the very light bent around him as if honoring his presence. His beauty was so severe it was almost painful to look upon. And his eyes, they held her frozen, seeing right through her worn cloak and her fragile courage down to the very core of her frightened soul. "Peace, Alara of Oakhaven," he said, and his voice was like the deep, resonant note of a cello vibrating in her bones. "The berry is not poisoned. It is a gift from the wood and from me." Alara could only stare, her mind blank with a terror that was somehow mixed with awe. The Elven king! The stories were true, and he knew her name. Alara's voice was a dry rasp, lost in the immense humming silence that followed the king's words. You know me?" It was a foolish thing to say, but it was all her reeling mind could grasp. "The whispering wood knows all who walk its paths," Kaelin replied, his tone neutral yet not unkind. He took a slow step forward, and Alara fought the instinct to scramble backward. "It speaks of your sorrow, of the injustice that drove you here. It tells me you carry a spark within you that should have been celebrated, not feared." He gestured to the fairy ring and the berry, "And it also tells me you are prudent and hungry." With a flick of his wrist, so subtle she almost missed it, the berry lifted from its mossy bed and floated gently through the air, coming to rest in her palm. It was cool and firm, and its scent was intoxicating. "Eat. It will give you strength for the journey." "Journey?" Alara whispered, her fingers closing instinctively around the fruit. You're sending me away?" A part of her, the sensible, terrified part, screamed that this was what she wanted, to leave this impossible place and its impossible king. But a deeper, older part of her soul cried out in protest at the thought of leaving. Kaelin watched the conflict in her eyes. "That is one path," he said carefully. "I could guide you to the forest's edge, and you could return to the world of men. You would be safe from the wood's more aggressive defenses." He paused, letting the alternative hang in the air thick and potent. "Or you could come with me to the Sylvan Vale." Alara's heart gave a painful lurch. "The hidden kingdom? But I'm human. The stories say many things," Kaelin interrupted, a hint of something like weariness touching his glacial eyes. "Most of them are warnings crafted by my people to keep yours at bay. But you, Alara, are not entirely human, are you?" The question hung between them, a truth she had spent her life running from, now spoken aloud by a being of myth. Tears welled in her eyes again, but these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of a shocking, profound relief. He saw it. He knew, and he did not look at her with fear. "I never meant for it to happen," she choked out. "The blooming, the healing, it just comes, and it ruins everything." "It does not have to," Kaelin said, and he took another step closer. He was now near enough that she could see the intricate, living silver of the circlet on his brow, could seal the cool, clean energy that radiated from him. "What you call ruin, my people would call a birthright, a dormant gift, awakening in a time of need. The Whispering Wood has recognized that gift. It has offered you shelter, and I—" He hesitated, the kingly certainty faltering for a fraction of a second, revealing the lonely elf beneath. "I offer you a choice. Return to a world that wishes to extinguish your light, or come to a place that might help you understand it." The offer was insane. To follow an elven king into his forbidden realm? It was the stuff of the very fairy tales that ended with mortals trapped for 100 years, dancing until their feet wore away. But as she looked into his ancient, earnest eyes, Alara realized she had already made her choice the moment she crossed into the wood. She had been searching for a place to belong, and this king, with his sad eyes and unexpected kindness, was offering her a key. Slowly, she brought the berry to her lips and took a small bite. Flavor exploded on her tongue, sunlight and cold spring water and the essence of wild honey. Strength, warm and immediate, flowed into her limbs. She ate the rest, and when she was done, she met Kaelin's gaze squarely. "I will come with you," she said, her voice firmer than it had been in months. A flicker of something, triumph, relief, passed over Kaelin's stoic face. He nodded. "Then we should depart. Dawn is the safest time to walk the deeper paths." The journey that followed was unlike anything Alara could have dreamed of. Kaelin led her along trails that seemed to unspool before them, only to vanish once they had passed. They walked through groves where the trees were woven into living archways, their leaves chiming like crystal bells in a breeze they could not feel. They crossed streams on bridges of solidified moonlight that felt like cool, smooth glass underfoot. Creatures watched them from the shadows, eyes like glowing coals, forms of dappled light and moving bark. Once, a great stag-like creature with antlers of intertwined branches and glowing moss stepped onto the path ahead, regarding them with solemn, intelligent eyes, before bowing its head to Kaelin and melting away. Alara was speechless, her fear slowly being replaced by a burgeoning, awe-struck wonder. Kaelin walked beside her in silence for a long while, then began to speak. His voice was a quiet guide in the enchantment. "The Sylvan Vale is the heart of the Whispering Wood. It is not a city as humans know it, but a living tapestry. Our homes are grown, not built. Our art is the careful guidance of nature, our music the harmony of the elements." He glanced at her. "Your gift, the green magic, it is the magic of the Vale's founding. It is the reason the wood accepted you. You have a distant ancestor who was of the Fae, or perhaps one of my own people who chose a mortal path long ago." "My grandmother used to tell stories," Alara remembered, "about a beautiful stranger with eyes like the moon who stayed one summer and left before the autumn frost. She said our line was touched by starlight. I thought it was just a story to make us feel special." The oldest stories often hold the deepest truths. You are not an outcast, Alara. You are a lost piece of an older world, finally finding home. The concept was so vast, so healing, it made her head spin. Home? Could this truly become that? The forest began to change. The silver-barked trees grew taller, their canopies knitting together so completely that the sky was hidden. The air grew even sweeter, charged with a gentle, thrumming power. And then the trees simply parted. Alara stopped, her breath catching in her throat. Before her lay the Sylvan Vale. It was a vast, hidden basin nestled between impossibly high cliffs of living rock, draped with waterfalls that fell in silent, silvery veils. The floor of the vale was a symphony of curated wilderness. Structures rose from the earth, towers that were giant, hollowed-out trees, their windows glowing with soft greenish light. palaces formed from interwoven vines and blooming flowers, pathways of luminous moss that spiraled up living pillars. In the center, a great tree, larger than a mountain, soared upward, its branches fanning out to form a secondary celestial canopy, from which hung thousands of delicate, glowing orbs like captured stars. The air was filled with the soft sound of waterfalls, distant ethereal music, and the subtle hum of profound, ancient magic. It was breathtaking. It was terrifying. It was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. As they emerged from the tree line onto a wide, mossy ledge overlooking the vale, figures began to appear on the winding paths below. Slender, graceful, their beauty sharp and alien. Elves. Dozens, then hundreds, all stopping their activities to look up at the ledge, at their king, and at the mortal girl beside him. A wave of sheer, paralyzing self-consciousness washed over Alara. She was covered in travel dirt, her clothes were rags, and she stood beside a being of radiant, immortal majesty. She was an ugly blot on a perfect painting. Kaelin must have sensed her panic. He did not touch her, but he stepped slightly in front of her, a subtle protective gesture that did not go unnoticed by the watching crowd. "Remember," he said quietly, his voice for her alone, "the wood welcomed you. That is a higher endorsement than any crown I wear. Walk with your head high, daughter of starlight. You have every right to be here." Then he turned to face his people, and his voice rang out clear and commanding across the silent vale. "People of the Sylvan Vale, I present to you Alara of Oakhaven. The Whispering Wood has granted her its sanctuary, for she carries within her the echo of the old green magic. She is our guest, and under my protection." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. 1,000 elven eyes bored into her, filled with curiosity, shock, disdain, and in some, a flicker of something darker, hostility. From the crowd, 3 elves detached themselves and ascended the path towards the ledge with elegant, swift grace. The one in the lead was a female elf of stunning, severe beauty, her hair the color of dark wine, her eyes a piercing emerald. She wore robes of forest green that seemed to shift with her movements. On her right was a male elf with hair like sun-bleached wheat and a face of cold, polished marble. On her left was an older elf, his silver hair long and braided, his eyes the color of a twilight sky, watching everything with calm omniscience. They bowed to Kaelin, but their attention was squarely on Alara.
"My king," the green robe elf said, her voice like honey on a blade. "This is unprecedented. A mortal in the heart of the Vale." "My king," the green robe elf said, her voice like honey on a blade. "This is unprecedented. A mortal in the heart of the Vale." "Lady Seraphis," Kaelin acknowledged, his tone cooling. "The precedents were set in an age when mortals knew only conquest. Ilara is no conqueror." The cold-faced elf, Lord Theron, spoke next. "She is a variable. Our isolation is our preservation. You risk everything we have protected for a stray." The older elf, Master Alden, simply studied Ilara, his head tilted. "The magic around her is faint but true," he murmured, almost to himself. "Wild and untrained, like a seed carried on a forgotten wind." He looked at Kaelin. "You mean to teach her?" "I mean to offer her the choice to learn. The same choice the wood offered her. She may stay as a guest and a student, or she may leave when she wishes." "And if the council disagrees?" Lady Seraphis asked, a challenge in her tone. Kaelin's glacial eyes frosted over completely. "The crown has spoken on matters of sanctuary since the first dawn, Lady Seraphis. The council may advise, but it does not command the king's mercy." He turned his back on them, a dismissive gesture of immense power, and offered his arm to Ilara. It was a courtly gesture, one of equality and public support. Trembling, her heart hammering, Ilara placed her fingers lightly on his forearm. The contact was electric. a jolt of cool energy that steadied her. Together, they began the descent into the vale, leaving the 3 stunned elves on the ledge. As they walked down the luminous path, the sea of elf faces parting before them, Ilara leaned slightly closer to Kaelin and whispered, "I think I've just made you a lot of enemies." He didn't look at her, but the corner of his mouth twitched, the barest hint of a smile. "I have had enemies for centuries, Ilara. They are tedious. A friend, however, that is a rare and precious thing indeed." And in that moment, surrounded by immortal beauty and simmering danger, Ilara knew 2 things with absolute certainty. She was in more peril than she had ever been in her life, and she would not trade this moment, this chance, for all the safety in the world. Ilara's new quarters were not a room, but a sphere, a chamber grown high within the trunk of one of the Vale's great sentinel trees, its curved walls smooth, living wood that pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic light, like a slow, sleeping heartbeat. One entire section was a lattice of crystal-clear, hardened sap that looked over the breathtaking vista of the Vale. The furnishings were grown from the tree itself, a bed of soft, resilient moss and woven silken fibers, a desk that emerged from the wall like a swelling in the trunk, chairs formed from gracefully arched roots. It was alien, beautiful, and utterly overwhelming. Lady Seraphis herself had escorted her here, her demeanor a mask of icy politeness. "These were the chambers of the last Dreamweaver," she had said, her emerald eyes missing nothing as Ilara gaped at the view. "They have been empty for a long time. I trust you will find them suitable." The way she said suitable made it sound like an accusation. After she left, Ilara stood in the center of the spherical room, feeling more lost than she had in the forest. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant, haunting song of some unknown bird. She was a doll placed in a diorama of impossible beauty, and she had no idea what to do next. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, a sound like a single drop of water falling into a deep pool. A section of the wall shimmered and became insubstantial, and Kaelin stepped through. He had changed from his travel-worn robes into a formal tunic of deep gray, the silver circlets stark against his pale hair. He carried a bundle of soft fabric. "I thought you might wish for a change of attire," he said, his voice softer here in the private space. He laid the bundle on the moss bed. The fabrics were shades of forest green, silver, and deep blue, soft as cloud and light as air. "They will adjust to your form. It is a simple enchantment." "Thank you," I managed, my throat tight. I gestured helplessly around the room. "This place, it's too much. I don't belong in a room that belonged to someone called the last Dreamweaver." Kaelin walked to the crystal window, gazing out, his expression unreadable. "Her name was Lyra, and she was not so different from you. She saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. She could sing seeds into forests and paint visions on the air that would come true." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "She faded away 2 centuries ago. We have not had a Dreamweaver since. Some say the magic left our world." "And you put me in her room?" Ilara asked, incredulous. "Isn't that inviting comparison or disappointment?" "I put you here," Kaelin said slowly, "because this chamber responds to the kind of magic you carry. It is a place of growth and potential. It may help you." He paused. "And because it is one of the most secure places in the Vale, the tree itself will guard you." The implication was clear. She was not completely safe here. The thought sent a fresh chill down her spine. "Lord Theron and Lady Seraphis really don't want me here. They represent a faction that believes our survival depends on absolute isolation and purity of bloodline. Your presence challenges both doctrines. You are a living bridge to the mortal world, and your diluted blood carries a purer form of our oldest magic than some of our own nobles possess. It is inconvenient for their worldview. So I'm a political problem, Ilara sighed, sinking onto the root chair. You are a catalyst, Kaelin corrected. The veil has been still for too long, like a deep pool with no inlet or outlet, stagnant. Your arrival is a stone thrown into that pool. The ripples will disturb many who have grown comfortable in the stillness. And you, Ilara dared to ask, looking up at him, are you comfortable with the stillness? For a long moment he was silent. His eyes, usually so distant, seemed to focus on her with a new intensity. I have been king for 400 years, Ilara. I have known nothing but duty and stillness. It is a gilded cage. But we did not bring you here to discuss my grievances. You are tired. Rest. Tomorrow your training begins. Master Alden has agreed to be your tutor in the history and theory of magic, and I will teach you the practice. He left as silently as he had come, the wall solidifying behind him. Ilara changed into the elven garments, a simple long tunic and leggings that felt like a second skin and moved with her perfectly. She lay on the moss bed, staring up at the softly glowing ceiling. Her mind raced with the day's impossible events. An elven king, a hidden kingdom, enemies among the immortals, and a magic inside her that was suddenly not a curse, but a heritage. As she drifted into an exhausted sleep, the last thing she heard was a whisper, not from the door, but from the very walls around her. A gentle, feminine sigh that seemed to say, "At last, you are here." Her dreams were vivid and strange. She was walking through a forest of crystal trees, each one holding a frozen moment of beauty, a blooming flower, a leaping deer, a falling star. At the center of the forest was a pool of liquid silver. A figure stood by the pool, a female elf with hair like flowing water and eyes full of sorrow. She turned to Ilara and smiled, but before she could speak, the dream shattered into 1,000 shards of light. Ilara woke with a gasp, the echo of that sorrowful smile etched in her mind. The room was dark, except for the faint bioluminescence of the walls, and then she saw it. On the surface of her desk, where there had been nothing before, a single perfect white rose had grown, its petals glowing with their own soft light. Nestled within its petals was a tiny scroll of thin bark. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. The script was elegant, unfamiliar, but as her eyes traced the letters, they shifted and resolved into words she could understand. Beware the thorns that masquerade as vines. Not all who smile in the starlight wish for your dawn. Trust the roots, trust the king, and learn quickly, child of forgotten starlight. The silence before the storm is the most dangerous time of all. It was unsigned. A warning. A welcome. A threat? Ilara clutched the bark scroll to her chest, her blood running cold. The last Dreamweaver's chambers were not just secure, they were watching, and someone or something was trying to speak to her. The stillness of the Sylvan Vale, she realized, was indeed the most dangerous kind, the kind that hid currents of deep, ancient strife just beneath its beautiful, placid surface, and she, the catalyst, was now right in the middle of it. The following days in the Sylvan Vale settled into a surreal rhythm. Ilara's world became divided between light and shadow, wonder and warning. Her mornings were spent with Master Alden in the Archive of Echoing Leaves, a vast circular chamber where the walls were not stone, but living vertical gardens of fern and flowering vine. Knowledge was not stored in books, but in crystals that hung from the ceiling like intricate fruit, glowing with inner light. When touched with focused intent, they would whisper their stored information directly into the mind. Alden was a patient, if distant, teacher. His voice was dry as autumn leaves as he guided her through the fundamentals. "Magic is not a force to be commanded, child," he intoned on her first day. "It is a river. You may build a mill upon it to use its power, or you may divert a stream to water a field, but you cannot stop its flow. Your human ancestors tried to dam it, to bottle it. That is why their magic is often volatile, explosive. Our way is to harmonize, to listen." He taught her to meditate, to still the frantic human chatter of her mind and listen for the deeper songs, the song of stone, slow and deep, the song of water, flowing and changeable, the song of green growing things, which was the one that resonated within her like a plucked harp-string. "Your affinity is clear," Alden remarked one morning, as a training crystal glowed a vibrant emerald at her touch, whispering secrets of phytokinesis. "The old wild magic. It is why the wood responded to you, but it is untamed. Without control, such power can be as dangerous as a wildfire. It can grow beautiful things, yes, but it can also grow thorns where you wish for petals, or twist a healing into a corruption." Her afternoons belonged to Kaelin. Their lessons took place in a private glade at the base of the heart tree, the colossal center of the Vale. Here, the magic was so thick in the air Alara can almost taste it, sweet and sharp, like lightning and honey. Kaelin was a different kind of teacher. Where Alden was theory, Kaelin was practice. He was demanding, precise but never cruel. He taught her to shape her will, to visualize the outcome not as a wish, but as an inevitable fact. Under his guidance, she learned to make a dormant seed sprout, grow, and bloom within minutes. She learned to sense the illness in a wilting leaf and pour gentle energy into it until it straightened, vibrant and healthy. During these sessions, the rigid, kingly mask he wore in court would slip. She saw his fascination with the process, his genuine delight when she mastered a difficult technique. Once, when she managed to coax a trail of glowing moss to climb a specific path up a rock in a complex pattern he'd described, he actually smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his austere face and made something warm and fluttery unfold in Alara's chest. "You have a natural talent." His voice held a note of pride. "It is as if you are remembering, not learning." But these moments of light were bracketed by shadows. Her life in the Vale was not that of a simple guest. She was a spectacle. When she walked the luminous pathways with Seraphis or one of the few handmaidens assigned to her, she felt the weight of countless eyes. The elves did not stare openly, that would be uncouth, but she felt their gazes like cold fingertips on the back of her neck. Whispers followed her, snippets of the musical elven tongue that she was slowly beginning to decipher. Words like mortal stain, dilution, and the king's folly floated in the air. Lord Farron was the most openly hostile. He would be present at the formal evening gatherings in the great glade, where the court would share meals and listen to haunting melodies played on instruments of wood and crystal. He never addressed her directly, but his speeches to Kaelin and the council were always pointed. "Our strength has always been in our unity, our separation. To introduce an unknown element, a creature of fleeting years and mortal passions, into the heart of our eternal home, it is not wisdom, it is sentiment, and sentiment is a luxury our fading people can no longer afford." Alara had flushed with shame, staring at her plate of jewel-like fruits. Kaelin, seated at the high table, had set down his goblet. The sound was soft, but it silenced the hall. "Our strength, Lord Theron," the king said, his voice dangerously quiet, "has also been our wisdom, and wisdom recognizes that change is the only constant, even for the immortal. To cling to isolation while the world turns is not preservation, it is a slow suicide. Alara's presence is not a threat. It is a reminder that there is still beauty and magic beyond our borders, and our own magic is not so pure that it cannot be refreshed by a new source."
The tension in the glade was so thick it was hard to breathe. Farron had bowed, his face a mask of cold fury, and said nothing more. But the battle lines were now drawn in the open. The anonymous warnings in her chamber continued, appearing as suddenly growing flowers or leaves with veins that formed words. They were cryptic, poetic, and increasingly urgent. The roots are stirring, but so are the stones that wish to crush them. He watches you not just with a teacher's eye. Be careful where that path leads. The festival of twin moons approaches, a time of power, a time of peril. Alara confided in no one, not even Kaelin. She didn't know who to trust. The warnings felt like they came from a place of protection, but they also sowed seeds of paranoia. Was Kaelin's kindness just a political gambit? Were his smiles genuine, or part of some long elven game? Her only solace, ironically, was the whispering wood itself. With Kaelin's permission, she began taking solitary walks in the forests just beyond the Vale's immediate borders. There, among the silver trees, she felt no judgment, but acceptance. She practiced her magic freely, singing to saplings and encouraging patches of luminous fungi. The wood sang back, its voice a complex chorus that soothed her lonely heart. It was on one of these walks, about 3 weeks after her arrival, that she found it. A small, hidden clearing she hadn't seen before, dominated by a single, ancient tree unlike any other. Its bark was black as polished obsidian, and its leaves were a deep, bloody crimson. At its base, the ground was bare of moss, and the air was cold and still, devoid of the wood's ever-present hum. As Alara approached, a wave of deep, profound wrongness washed over her. This was a wound in the forest, a place of sickness. Her green magic recoiled inside her, not with fear, but with a kind of grieving anger. Without thinking, she knelt before the stone and placed her hands on the cold earth. A vision slammed into her, violent and chaotic. She saw not the clearing, but the Vale in turmoil. The luminous orbs in the heart tree shattered, raining down like falling stars. The beautiful, grown structures withered and cracked. She saw elves running, their faces etched with terror. And standing in the center of the chaos, amid swirling shadows, was a tall, familiar figure, with hair the color of sun-bleached wheat, a cruel smile on his lips, Lord Theron. In his hands he held the black, cracked stone, and it pulsed with a sickly violet light. The vision ended as suddenly as it began. Alara jerked back, gasping, her hands stinging as if burned. The clearing was just a clearing, the stone just a stone. But the image of Theron's triumphant face was seared into her mind. This was no mere political disagreement. This was a threat, a planned betrayal. And the sickness in this clearing, this black tree and its stone, was connected to it. She ran back to the Vale, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had to tell Kaelin. She burst into the glade where they usually trained, but he wasn't there. Frantic, she headed for his chambers, a sweet groan into the heart tree itself. She found him on a high balcony looking out over his kingdom, his profile etched against the twilight. He turned as she approached, his expression shifting from contemplation to concern as he saw her disheveled state. "Alara, what is it? What's happened?" The words tumbled out of her in a rush. The hidden clearing, the black tree, the cold stone, the vision. She described Theron, the destruction, the pulsing stone. As she spoke, Kaelin's face grew pale and still, his eyes turning to chips of ice. When she finished, he was silent for a long, terrible moment. "The obsidian blight," he finally whispered, the words heavy with dread. "It is an old corruption, a magic from a time before the Vale, tied to envy and the thirst for stolen power. We sealed it away centuries ago, or so we believed." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw real fear in the eyes of the Elven king. If Theron has found a way to harness it, If he plans to use the power of the Twin Moons Festival to activate it. He didn't need to finish. The vision said it all. You believe me? Alara asked, surprised. After all the suspicion she faced, his immediate trust was a balm. The green magic does not lie about such things, he said grimly. It is the forest's immune system. You sensed a sickness, and it showed you the source of the infection. He strode past her, his robes swirling. Come, we must go to the council. We must confront him with this before the festival. But we have no proof, Alara protested, following him. It was just a vision. It is proof enough for me, Kaelin said, his voice hard. And the obsidian blight leaves a trace. If he is connected to it, we will find it. As they hurried through the luminous corridors of the Heart Tree, Alara's mind raced. The peaceful, beautiful vale was a powder keg, and she had just seen the spark. The storm was no longer approaching. It had already begun. The High Council Chamber was a place of solemn, intimidating beauty. It was a wide, flat disk of polished white stone floating in a shaft of air within the Heart Tree's colossal trunk, open to the dizzying heights above and the depths below. 9 seats of living, twisted wood were arranged in a circle, 8 for the counselors and 1, slightly larger, for the king. The air hummed with potent, ancient wards. Kaelin did not summon the full council. He called only the 3 most senior, Master Alden, Lady Seraphis, and Lord Theron. The others, he said, could be informed later to prevent premature panic. Alara stood just behind Kaelin's seat, trying to make herself small, feeling the hostile gaze of Theron and the curious, calculating one of Seraphis burning into her. You call us in the deep hours, my king, for what urgent matter? Has our mortal guest found our accommodations lacking? A faint, condescending smile touched his lips. Kaelin ignored the barb. He stood before his throne, his hands clasped behind his back, the image of regal authority. A grave threat to the Vale has been discovered. The obsidian blight has returned. The effect was instantaneous. Master Alden's head snapped up, his twilight eyes wide with shock. Lady Seraphis went perfectly still, her emerald gaze darting between Kaelin and Theron. Lord Theron did not react. His cold marble face showed nothing, not surprise, not fear. That, more than anything, confirmed Kaelin's suspicions. Impossible, Seraphis breathed. The obsidian blight was purged. The heartstone was shattered and buried in the forgotten depths. It seems a piece was missed, Kaelin said, his eyes fixed on Theron. Or perhaps recovered. Alara discovered a locus of its corruption in a hidden clearing north of the Silver Falls. A black tree, a cracked stone, and when she touched the place, the magic showed her a vision. Now Theron's expression shifted, a slight contemptuous arch of one pale eyebrow. A vision from the human. My king, with respect, are we to base the security of the Vale on the nightmares of a mortal child? Her kind are famously susceptible to fancy and fear. The vision was specific. It showed the Vale in ruins during the peak of the Twin Moons Festival, and it showed you, Lord Theron, at the center of the destruction, wielding the Heartstone. A deadly silence fell. In the council chamber, an accusation like this was tantamount to declaring treason. Theron slowly rose from his seat. His movement was fluid, controlled, but Alara could see the tension coiling in him like a spring. This is an outrage, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You would take the word of this creature over mine? A member of the High Council who has served this kingdom for 5 centuries. She is clearly manipulating you, preying on the unusual interest you have taken in her. The insinuation hung in the air, poisonous and clear. Seraphis looked sharply at Kaelin, her mind visibly working. The obsidian blight leaves a trace, Kaelin said coldly, ignoring the personal attack. A simple truth-seeking spell from Master Alden will confirm or deny your contact with it. For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed Theron's face, a flash of panic, quickly suppressed. You would subject a counselor to such an indignity on the word of an outsider? To protect the veil, I would subject myself to it, Kaelin said coldly. Master Alden, if you please. Alden stood, his aged face grave. He raised his hand, and a complex symbol of silver light began to form in the air before him, a weaving of delicate lines meant to reveal hidden truths and magical affinities. Theron watched it form, his body rigid. Then he laughed, a short, harsh sound that echoed in the stone chamber. Very well, play your game, Kaelin, but you are looking in the wrong place. He turned his icy gaze to Alara. You are so concerned with a mythical blight, you fail to see the real corruption standing right beside you. He gestured dramatically toward her. She does not just carry the old magic, she is the catalyst for the blight's return. Her mortal presence, her unbalanced, wild power, has acted like a key, unsealing what was buried. The forest accepted her not out of kinship, but because it sensed a kindred source of chaos. She is the disease, pretending to be the cure.
The accusation was so sudden, so viciously clever, that it stole the breath from Alara's lungs. It twisted everything. Her acceptance by the wood, her magic, her very presence into a weapon against her. She saw the doubt flicker in Seraphis's eyes, saw Alden hesitate, the truth spell wavering. Lies, Kaelin said, but a note of strain had entered his voice. Theron's narrative was insidiously plausible to those who already distrusted her. Is it? Theron pressed, advancing a step. The blight appears after she arrives. She is the one who finds it. She is the one with the convenient vision pointing to me, her most vocal opponent. It is a classic mortal stratagem. Create a crisis, then position yourself as the only solution. She has bewitched you, Kaelin. Can you not see it? Enough. Kaelin's voice cracked like a whip, power radiating from him in a wave that made the floating disc tremble. Master Alden, complete the spell. On Lord Theron, now. Alden, shaken but obedient, focused. The silver web floated toward Theron. The counselor stood his ground, a sneer on his lips. The spell touched him, enveloped him in shimmering light, and then dissipated harmlessly. It showed nothing. No trace of void magic. No evidence of the blight. Alara's heart sank into her boots. How? Theron's smile was triumphant. Satisfied? The accusation is false, a fabrication. Now let us discuss the real threat. He turned his victorious, pitiless eyes on Alara. The mortal must be confined. Her magic must be bound until we can determine the true extent of the danger she poses, for the safety of the veil. Seraphis, after a long moment, nodded slowly. It is the prudent course, my king, until this is resolved. Alden looked troubled, but said nothing. The tide had turned completely. Kaelin stood, a statue of fury and frustration. He looked from Theron's smug face to Alara's terrified one. He was king, but he could not defy the united will of his senior council on a matter of security without evidence. To do so would be tyranny, and would fracture his rule. Alara will return to her chambers in the living tower, Kaelin declared, his voice taut. She will be guarded, for her own protection as much as ours, but her magic will not be bound. She remains under my protection and is still a guest of the veil. This is not a punishment. It is a precaution until I can investigate these claims myself. He shot a look at Theron that promised retribution. All of them. It was a compromise, a desperate holding action, but as the guards, not Kaelin's personal guard, but the Veil sentinels answerable to the council, came to escort her away, Alara knew what it really was, a defeat. And as she was led from the chamber, she caught one last look at Lord Theron. His cold eyes met hers, and in their depths she didn't see triumph anymore. She saw a gloating, terrible patience. The festival was coming, and whatever his real plan was, it was still on track. He had outmaneuvered the king, and he had isolated her completely. The beautiful cage of the Sylvan Vale had just become a prison. Chapter 7. The Hidden Heart and the Silent Tree. Confinement in the living tower was a gilded, lonely hell. The spherical room, once a place of wonder, now felt like a luxurious cell. The crystal window offered a breathtaking view of the Vale preparing for the Twin Moons Festival, lanterns being strung, luminous flowers being coaxed into extravagant blooms, practice melodies floating on the sweet air, a celebration she was now barred from. 2 silent, stern-faced sentinel guards stood watch outside her door at all times. Her lessons with Alden and Kaelin were suspended. Her solitary walks in the wood were forbidden. Her worst of all was the silence from Kaelin. 3 days passed without word. She understood he was navigating a political minefield, that overt support for her now would only fuel Theron's narrative, but the isolation aided her. The anonymous warnings had also ceased. It was as if her source of cryptic advice knew the walls now had ears. Her only solace was the tree itself. In her boredom and anxiety, she began talking to it, not expecting an answer, just pouring out her fears, her frustration, her memories of Oakhaven. She would press her palm against the warm, pulsing wood and whisper her thoughts. On the 4th night, as the twin moons, one silver and one a pale blue, began their slow ascent into the sky, the tree answered. She was lying on her moss bed when a section of the wall opposite the window began to glow with a different light. Not the steady pulse, but a soft golden radiance that formed the outline of a door. It wasn't there before. With a soft sigh of releasing air, the outline became real and the door swung inward, revealing not a corridor, but a spiral staircase leading down into the heart of the great tree. A mix of fear and wild hope surged in Alara. This was it, another message, an invitation, or a trap set by Theron. She approached the opening and peered down. The stairs, carved from the living wood, glowed with the same golden light, descending into deep, fragrant darkness. From below, she felt a pull, a gentle, irresistible call that resonated with the green magic in her blood. She had to go. It was a risk, but staying here, waiting for Theron's next move or for the festival to bring disaster, was a worse one. She slipped into the staircase, and the door sealed shut behind her, leaving no trace. The descent felt endless. The air grew warmer, richer, filled with the scent of ancient soil and growing things. The golden light guided her steps. Finally, the stairs ended, opening into a cavernous space that took her breath away. She stood in the literal heart of the living tower. It was a vast, spherical chamber deep underground, the walls a dense weave of glowing roots as thick as houses, pulsing with slow, powerful light. In the center of the chamber, rising from a pool of crystal-clear water that reflected the root light, was the tree's core, a column of pure, radiant energy, white gold, and throbbing with such potent life force that it made the air vibrate. This was the nexus, the source of the tree's magic, and by extension, a cornerstone of the Vale's power. But something was wrong. A vein of darkness, like a crack of obsidian, ran up one side of the luminous core. From it seeped a dull, purplish-black haze that stained the light around it. The water in the pool beneath that section was murky and still. The roots on that side of the chamber were dull, their light flickering weakly. The blight. It was here, not just in a distant clearing, but at the very heart of one of the Vale's sentinel trees, and it was spreading. "So, you found it," a voice said, soft, filled with sorrow. Alara spun. Sitting on a root bench near the corrupted section was a figure she recognized from her dream, the elf woman with hair like flowing water and sad eyes. The last dreamweaver, Lyra, or rather her echo. She was translucent, shimmering with faint light, a memory given form by the tree's magic. "You've been leaving me the warnings," Alara breathed. Lyra's ghost nodded. "My consciousness is woven into this tree, into all the old places of power. I have been sleeping, fading.
Your arrival, your magic, it woke me. It gave me enough strength to reach you." She gestured to the corrupted core. "He is clever, Theron. He did not take the Heartstone Tune's quarters. He planted a seed of it here, where the life force is strongest, where it would grow like a parasite, hidden in plain sight. The clearing you found was merely a symptom. This is the disease." "Why?" Alara asked, stepping closer. "Why would he do this? Destroy his own home?"
"Power," Lyra said simply. "The blight consumes life magic and converts it into raw, destructive power. He cannot wield the old green magic. His spirit is too cold, too rigid. But void magic, that responds to will alone, to ambition. He believes that with the power of the blight, amplified by the twin moons, he can shatter the old wards, overthrow Kaelin, and reshape the Veil in his own image. A kingdom of order and control, not growth and harmony. He thinks it will make us strong again. He is a fool. It will only make us a beacon for darker things and destroy the beauty he claims to preserve." "We have to tell Kaelin," Ilara said urgently. "We have proof now." "The tree is sealed, child. I opened the way for you, but I cannot send a message, and you cannot leave the way you came. The door was one way. There is another path, an old root tunnel that leads to the Grove of Remembrance, but it is perilous and watched by Theron's agents within the Sentinels." Ilara's hope faltered, trapped in the heart of the tree with a ghost and a spreading corruption. "Then what can we do?" Lyra looked at her, her sad eyes suddenly sharp. "You can fight it. Your magic is the antithesis of the blight. It is life to its death, growth to its decay. You cannot destroy the Heartstone seed. Only Theron can unmake what he has wrought, or Kaelin with the full might of the crown. But you can contain it. You can push it back, hold it at bay, long enough for the truth to come out." "I don't know how," Ilara whispered, staring at the pulsing, sickly violet stain. "Yes, you do," Lyra insisted. "You have been learning control. Now you must learn purpose, not to grow a flower, but to defend a forest, not to heal a leaf, but to fight a plague. Place your hands on the core, pour your will into it, sing the song of green growing things, not as a lullaby, but as a battle hymn. The tree will help you. I will help you." Terror clawed at Ilara's throat. This was too big. She was just a girl from Oakhaven. But she looked at Lyra's fading, determined face. She thought of Kaelin fighting a political battle based on faith in her. She thought of the beautiful, sleeping veil above, unaware of the poison in its roots. She took a deep, shuddering breath. She walked to the corrupted core, the wrongness making her skin crawl. Ignoring the fear, she placed both palms flat against the warm, vibrating surface, right beside the obsidian crack. She closed her eyes. She pushed aside the human panic, the doubt. She reached for the deep green well of power inside her. She remembered Kaelin's lessons, visualized the outcome as an inevitable fact. She didn't imagine the blight gone. She imagined a wall, a barrier of pure, vibrant, impenetrable life. She imagined roots of light and will burrowing into the corruption and holding it fast, isolating it. She poured every ounce of her strength, her hope, her love for the strange adopted home into that image. And she sang. Not with her voice, but with her spirit. The song of green rowing things, the melody Kaelin had taught her. But she changed it. She made it stronger, clearer, a radiant chord of defiance against the silence of decay. At first, nothing happened. The blight pulsed, unconcerned. Then a spark of green light flickered at her fingertips. The tree's core, sensing the familiar healing magic, responded. The golden light brightened. The roots around the chamber glowed more fiercely. Lyra's ghostly form solidified slightly, adding her own whispering strength to the song. A tendril of pure, emerald light shot from Ilara's hand into the crack. Where it touched the purple-black haze, it sizzled, and the haze recoiled. More tendrils followed, weaving a net of living light over the corruption, containing it, compressing it.
The black vein in the core stopped spreading. The murk in the pool began to clear at the edges. It was working, but the cost was immense. Ilara felt her energy being siphoned away, a river pouring out of her. Her knees buckled, but she held on, gritting her teeth. She was a conduit, and the tree drank deeply. "Hold, child," Lyra's voice urged, now faint. "Just a little longer. Seal the cage." With a final, gasping effort, Ilara pushed. The net of green light solidified into a crystalline sheath around the blight seed, trapping it completely. The obsidian crack was still there, but it was now encased in a prison of shimmering emerald. The wrongness was muted, contained. Ilara's strength gave out. She collapsed to her knees, panting, dizzy, her hands burning. She had done it. She hadn't cured it, but she had bought time. Lyra's form was fading rapidly, a smile of profound gratitude on her translucent face. "Thank you. The tree will remember. The path, the root tunnel. Behind the pool. Follow the light of the roots that still shine. Tell Kalen. Tell him to look to the grove of remembrance, under the weeping willow." And she was gone. Ilara lay on the warm, root-covered floor for a long time, gathering the dregs of her strength. Finally, she pushed herself up. Behind the now clear pool, she saw it, a low, dark opening from which a few brave, glowing root tips protruded like guiding stars. She had contained the immediate threat. Now she had to reach the king, and she had to do it before the twin moons reached their peak and Theron discovered his weapon had been neutralized. The real race was just beginning. The root tunnel was not meant for humans. It was a cramped, winding passage through the dense, ancient root system of the living tower and the surrounding forest, smelling of damp earth and mycelium. The only light came from the sporadic, faint glow of healthy roots embedded in the walls and ceiling. Ilara moved in a low crouch, her progress slow and painful. Every muscle ached from the effort of containing the blight, and a deep, magical fatigue made her head swim. But Lyra's final words were a drumbeat in her mind, the grove of remembrance, under the weeping willow. She had no idea where that was. She had never been allowed to explore that far. But the tunnel seemed to have a will of its own, branching and turning, always offering a path lit by the faintest glowing root, while the dark branches exhaled a sense of cold foreboding. She was being guided, she realized, by the tree or by Lyra's last spark of consciousness. The air grew cooler. The sound of dripping water echoed. She emerged from the root tunnel not into the open air, but into a vast underground cavern. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like stone teeth, and a shallow, silent stream cut through the center. Growing in the center of the stream, thriving without sunlight, was a single magnificent willow tree. Its branches were silver, not green, and they drooped to touch the water, which glowed with a soft blue light. This was it. The grove of remembrance was not a grove at all, but this hidden, sacred cavern. She waded across the cold stream, the glowing water swirling around her ankles, and approached the willow. What was she looking for? Under it. She knelt, pushing aside the curtain of silver leaves. There, nestled among its surface roots, partially submerged in the water, was a stone basin. It was filled not with water, but with a liquid, swirling silver mist, a scrying pool. As she peered into the mist, images began to form, not a vision of the future, but a record of the past. She saw Theron, centuries younger, but with the same cold eyes, studying forbidden texts in a secret library. She saw him unearth a shard of black stone from a sealed vault deep below the veil, ignoring the warnings etched on the seal. She saw him more recently in the hidden clearing, planting a smaller shard from that original heartstone at the base of the black tree, creating a secondary locus. And finally, she saw him just a few nights ago, using a complex, dark ritual to implant the primary seed into the heart of the living tower itself. The proof was irrefutable, recorded by the memory of the veil itself in this most sacred place. But how could she show this to anyone? She couldn't carry the pool. As if in answer, the mist in the basin swirled violently and then condensed, hardening into a palm-sized solid crystal that looked like a piece of captured moonlight with a dark, smoky core at its heart. A perfect record of the treason she had just witnessed. Ilara picked it up. It was cool and hummed with gentle power. A sound echoed through the cavern, the soft scrape of a boot on stone. Ilara froze, clutching the crystal to her chest. From the shadows on the far side of the cavern, a figure emerged. Not a sentinel, Lord Theron himself. He looked at her, then at the weeping willow, and his cold face twisted into a mask of fury. "You," he hissed, "you meddlesome mortal weed. I felt the containment in the tower. I should have had you disposed of the moment you set foot in the Vale." "It's over, Theron," Ilara said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. She held up the crystal. "The truth is here. Everyone will see what you've done." He laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "And who will you show? The sentinels who answer to me? The council who doubts you? The king who was too entangled in his fascination with you to see clearly? Give me the crystal, girl. Your death can still be painless. An accident in the tunnels. So tragic." He took a step forward and darkness began to coalesce around his hands, the same purplish-black haze of the blight. He hadn't just planted it, he had learned to channel its power. Ilara backed up, her mind racing. She was exhausted, and he was a centuries-old elf wielding destructive magic. She had no chance in a fight. But the cavern, it was a place of memory, of water and growing things, her elements. As Theron raised a hand, a bolt of void energy crackling toward her, Ilara did the only thing she could think of. She didn't try to block it. Instead, she dropped to her knees and slammed her free hand into the glowing stream, pouring the last dregs of her green magic into the water and the silver willow. "Protect the truth," she cried out, not to Theron, but to the cavern itself. The willow responded. Its silver branches lashed down like whips, intercepting the bolt of dark energy and absorbing it with a sizzle. The roots in the stream erupted from the water, tangling around Theron's legs. The very stones of the cavern glowed, and the light focused on him, a searing, purifying radiance that made him scream in pain and frustration. Not physical pain, but the agony of being exposed, of having his hidden darkness made manifest in a place of pure light. "You cannot win here," Ilara shouted over his screams. "This place knows your heart." With a final, furious roar, Theron unleashed a wave of dark energy that shattered the grasping roots and forced the light back. But the effort cost him. He staggered, his face pale with strain. He glared at her with pure, undiluted hatred. "This changes nothing. The festival is tonight. The moons will rise. With or without the tower's heart, the confluence of power will be enough to break the wards from the outside. My allies are ready. You've bought your king a few hours. Nothing more." He turned and fled back into the shadows, disappearing down another tunnel. Ilara slumped, gasping. She had survived and she had the crystal, but Theron was right. She had to reach Kayleen, and she had to do it now. The final confrontation wouldn't be in a council chamber. It would be under the twin moons, with the fate of the Vale hanging in the balance. She stumbled out of the cavern via the tunnel Theron had used, which led upward, toward fresh air and the sound of distant music. The festival of twin moons had begun. Emerging from a hidden fissure behind a waterfall of silver blooms, Ilara found herself on the outskirts of the Great Glade, the primary celebration site. The transformation was staggering. The entire glade was awash in ethereal light. The twin moons, now high and full, shone down, their combined light, silver and pale blue, casting everything in a dreamlike duality. Thousands of luminous orbs floated in the air, and bioluminescent flowers formed intricate glowing patterns on the ground. Elves, in their most exquisite finery, moved like graceful shadows and shafts of light through the crowds, their laughter and song weaving into the haunting music played on instruments of wind and crystal. It was breathtaking, and to Alara, scanning the crowds with a frantic heart, it was a nightmare, a beautiful stage set for destruction. She spotted the high platform where the royal party sat. Kayleen was there, clad in formal robes of midnight and silver, his crown upon his head. He looked regal, but also tense, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Seraphis and Alden sat beside him. There was no sign of Theron. She had to get to him, but the glade was packed, and she was still in her dirt-stained training clothes, looking like a wild thing that had crawled out of the earth. Pushing through the crowd of immortal, beautiful beings would draw every eye and likely get her detained by the sentinels before she could take 10 steps. Think. She needed a distraction. Her eyes fell on the great arch of intertwined vines at the glade's entrance, woven with white glowing flowers. An idea, desperate and risky, formed. Hiding behind the waterfall, she focused, not on growing, but on connecting. She reached out with her green magic, not to the arch itself, but to the millions of luminous spores in the air, the latent seeds in the soil, the sleeping potential in every petal around the glade's edge. She poured her will into a single, simple command, fueled by her urgency and the crystal's truth in her hand. Show them. Light the way. For a moment, nothing. Then a soft gasp rippled through the crowd nearest the arch. The white flowers woven into it began to pulse, not with their steady glow, but in a distinct rhythmic pattern. Then the pulse spread. Like a wave, the bioluminescent patterns in the ground began to throb in the same rhythm. The floating orbs dimmed and brightened in time. The very moss underfoot emitted soft flashes. It was a silent, spreading heartbeat of light, impossible to ignore, and it was marching in a direct, pulsating path from the archway straight toward the royal dais. All music stopped. All conversation ceased. Every elf in the glade stared, wonder and confusion on their faces, as the light path led their eyes to the source of the disturbance, to Alara, as she stepped out from behind the waterfall and began to walk down the path her magic had illuminated. A corridor of stunned elves parted before her. She kept her eyes locked on Kayleen, who had risen to his feet, his expression of shock and dawning hope. She held the memory crystal aloft, and it caught the twin moon's light, glowing with an inner radiance. She reached the foot of the dais. The silence was absolute, heavier than any noise. "King Kayleen," her voice sang, clear in the hush, "I bring proof of treason and proof of the true threat to the Vale." She tossed the crystal up to him. He caught it effortlessly. As his fingers closed around it, the crystal activated. Beams of light shot from it, projecting the recorded images into the air above the dais for all to see. Theron stealing the Heartstone shard, planting the blight, corrupting the living tower. The gasps from the crowd became a roar of disbelief and anger. Before the images finished, a commotion erupted at the far end of the glade. Theron appeared, no longer hiding his intent. He was surrounded by a contingent of sentinels, his loyalists. Darkness crackled around him, not the contained power from the cavern, but the unleashed, amplified fury of the blight, fed by the converging lunar energies. The black, cracked heartstone was in his hand, now glowing with violent violet light. "Lies!" he thundered, his voice magically amplified, drowning out the panic. "Fabrications from the mortal spy. She seeks to divide us so her kind can pick our bones. The old ways have failed. Look at us, fading, static, dying. I offer you strength, true power, the power to make the world fear our name again." He raised the Heartstone. Tendrils of void energy snaked out, not toward the crowd, but toward the great wards at the edges of the veil, the invisible barriers that kept it hidden and protected. Where the dark energy touched them, they sizzled and began to fray, revealing glimpses of the mortal world beyond. "Stop him!" Kayleen's command cut through the chaos, but the loyal sentinels were outnumbered by Theron's faction, and a chaotic skirmish broke out at the glade's edge. Kayleen looked from the crumbling wards to Theron and then to Alara. In his eyes, she saw the terrible calculation of a king. He had the power to fight Theron directly, but doing so would be a battle of magical titans that would likely destroy the glade and hundreds of his people. He needed to contain the fight, to shield the veil.
"The wards," Alara said, understanding dawning. "He's not trying to break out. He's trying to break them down, to let something in, or to transform the veil's magic completely." Kalen nodded, his face grim. "The blight seeks to convert all life energy into void. If he succeeds, the veil becomes a dead zone, a font of dark power he can control." He made a decision. "Alden, Seraphis, rally the mages, reinforce the wards. Buy me time." He leapt down from the dais, his own magic flaring around him, not darkness, but a brilliant, cold silver light, the magic of starlight and winter. He strode toward Theron, a blade of living crystal forming in his hand. "You betray your people, Theron, for power, for a dead kingdom of shadows?" "For a future!" Theron screamed back, and he met Kalen's charge. The two most powerful elves in the Vale clashed in the center of the glade. It was not a sword fight, but a duel of pure magic. Bolts of silver light met waves of devouring darkness. The ground trembled, the beautiful, glowing flora nearby withered and died where Theron's power touched it, only to be revived in patches by the residual green magic still humming in the air from Alara's display. Alara watched, helpless. She had no power left for a fight like this, but as she saw Kalen momentarily stagger under a concentrated blast of void energy, she knew she couldn't just watch. Theron's power was rooted in the blight, and the blight was a corruption of life. An idea, born of desperation and her deep connection to the green magic, sparked. She didn't look at the fighting elves. She looked down at the ground, at the roots of the great glade itself, the vast, interconnected network beneath the soil. And she remembered the living tower. She remembered how her magic had spoken to it, how it had responded. She dropped to her knees again, ignoring the battle, and plunged her hands into the soil. She closed her eyes. She wasn't trying to fight Theron. She was trying to talk to the veil, to the whispering wood, to every tree, every blade of grass, every root that threaded through this sacred earth. She poured out not a command, but a plea, a sharing of the truth she held in the crystal, of the sickness, of the love she had come to feel for this place. She showed it Kalen's loneliness and dedication. She showed it Theron's corrosive envy. She sang the song of green growing things, but this time it was a song of unity, of healing, of community. "He is hurting you," she whispered into the earth with her magic. "Help your king. Help yourselves. Remember what you are." For a moment, nothing. Then a tremor, deeper than the battle. A collective sigh seemed to pass through the very air. The elves, even those fighting, felt it, a shift in the foundation of the world. All around the glade, at the very edges where Theron's void energy was eating at the wards, the trees began to move. Not a wind, but a deliberate shifting. Ancient roots erupted from the soil, not violently, but with slow, immense purpose. They didn't attack Theron. Instead, they wove themselves into the fraying wards, reinforcing them with living wood and pure, ancient life force. The glimpses of the outside world vanished, sealed behind a new, living wall. The blight-fed magic cut off from its goal of breaking the boundary, recoiled.
Farron faltered, his connection to his external plan suddenly blocked. He screamed in rage, redirecting all his power at Kaelin in a final, desperate blast. But Kaelin, strengthened by the sudden surge of the Veil's own defensive will, stood firm. He met the dark blast with a shield of condensed starlight, and then thrust forward with his crystal blade. He didn't aim for Theron's heart. He aimed for the hand holding the Heartstone. The blade, guided by the combined will of the king and the awakened forest, found its mark. There was a sound like 1,000 mirrors shattering. The Heartstone exploded into harmless black dust. The void energy around Farron winked out. He collapsed to his knees, not from a wound, but from the sudden, catastrophic severing of the power he had depended on. He looked old and hollow and utterly defeated. The fighting among the sentinels stopped as his loyalists, seeing their leader fallen and the Veil itself rising against them, dropped their weapons. Silence returned to the great glade, broken only by the soft, settling sigh of the moving roots and Theron's ragged breathing. The twin moons shone down on a scene of saved beauty and on a mortal girl kneeling in the soil, her hands buried in the earth, the bridge between a king and his kingdom. In the aftermath, the great glade felt both shattered and renewed. The eerie, beautiful festival lights still glowed, but now they illuminated a scene of quiet, stunned reckoning. Farron's loyalist sentinels were disarmed and led away by their now vengeful former comrades. The wounded, few thanks to Kaelin's containment of the main fight, were tended to by healers. The reinforced living wards pulsed with a gentle, healthy light at the glade's edge, a testament to the Veil's awakened will. All eyes were on the center, where King Kaelin stood over the broken form of Lord Farron. The fallen counselor did not look up, his spirit as shattered as the Heartstone. Kaelin's expression was not of triumph, but of profound, weary sadness. He gestured, and 2 of his personal bards came forward to take Farron to the deep cells where he would await judgments by the full council. Then Kaelin turned. His gaze swept over his people, seeing their shock, their fear, their dawning understanding. Finally, his eyes found Elara. She had pulled her hands from the soil and was struggling to stand, her energy completely spent. Without a word, he crossed the space between them. He did not offer his hand. Instead, he simply stood before her, and then, in a gesture that sent a new ripple of shock through the assembled elves, he bowed. A deep, formal bow of respect from the king to a guest. "The Veil," he said, his voice clear and carrying to every ear. "Elara of Oakhaven, you uncovered the treason, you contained the corruption, and you reminded this ancient forest of its own heart." He straightened, and his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are not a catalyst for chaos. You are a healer, and you are welcome here as long as you wish to stay, as an honored friend, a trusted ally, and—" he paused, the word feeling momentous— "family." The last word hung in the air. It was a public, absolute acceptance that transcended politics and blood purity. A murmur, then a swelling of approval rose from the crowd. Lady Seraphis, her face pale but resolved, was the first to step forward and offer her a deep nod of respect. Master Alden did the same, his twilight eyes shining with something like pride. The formal proceedings took days. Farron, before the full council, with the memory crystal as undeniable evidence, confessed to his ambition and his crimes. He was stripped of his titles and magic and sentenced to eternal confinement in the silent, dreaming prisons deep beneath the earth, where he would fade into nothingness with only his regrets for company.
The blight seed in the living tower, now safely contained by Alara's emerald cage, was carefully, ritually purged by Kaelin and the senior mages, its darkness dissolved into harmless light. The black tree in the hidden clearing was uprooted and burned,
its ashes scattered to the four winds. The veil began the slow process of healing its hidden wound. Through it all, Ilara's status transformed completely. She was no longer the object of suspicion, but a heroine. Elves who had once looked through her now greeted her with respectful nods and even shy smiles. Children would peek at her from behind trees, whispering about the mortal who sang to the roots. Her training resumed, but it was different. Master Alden now treated her as a promising scholar rather than a curious anomaly. And Kaelin, their lessons became something more. They were still teacher and student, but also co-conspirators in healing the veil, spending long hours walking the recovered paths, discussing not just magic, but governance, history, and the delicate balance of their two worlds. One afternoon, several weeks after the festival, they stood on the same balcony where he had received her frantic warning about Theron. The veils stretched below them, vibrant and peaceful in the golden sunlight. "You never asked for any of this," Kaelin said quietly, not looking at her. "Exile, danger, political strife, you simply needed a place to rest." "I found more than rest," Ilara replied, leaning on the living rail. "I found a purpose. I found myself." He turned to her then, his silver eyes serious. "And what does that self want now, Ilara? The veil is safe. Your name is cleared here, and with the alliance I am forging, I can ensure it is cleared in the mortal world as well. You could return to Oakhaven, a heroine, or go anywhere. You are free." The offer was generous, and it felt like a door closing. She looked at him, at the lonely king who had watched over a sleeping stranger, who believed in her when no one else did, who fought for his people with every fiber of his being. She thought of the connection that had sparked between them from the first moment, a recognition that went beyond magic or circumstance. "Do you want me to go?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He was silent for a long time. The wind played with a strand of his silver hair. "No," he finally said, the words simple and devastating in its honesty. "I have lived 4 centuries, Ilara. I have known duty, responsibility, and a deep, enduring loneliness. In these few short months with you here, I have known companionship, wonder, hope. The thought of this place without your light in it," he shook his head, unable to finish. He took a step closer. He didn't reach for her hand, but his presence was a tangible warmth. "But my life is here. It is eternal, and it is bound to this throne. Your life is a brilliant, fleeting candle in comparison. It would be the height of selfishness to ask you to tie your one precious mortal life to my endless duty." Ilara's heart hammered. This was it, the unspoken thing between them, laid bare. "You're not asking, I'm telling. I don't want to go back. That life is over. This is my home. You are my home." She took a deep breath, forging ahead. "And as for my fleeting candle, Master Alden has been showing me texts. There are rituals, not to make me immortal, but to harmonize my life force with the veils, to extend my years, to let me walk beside you for a long, meaningful chapter of your story, if that is something you would want." The look on Kaelin's face then was one she would remember forever. The icy king melted away, revealing the weary, hopeful elf beneath. The loneliness in his eyes was replaced by a dawning, radiant joy so bright it was almost painful to behold. "It is the only thing I have wanted since the moment I saw you sleeping beneath my trees," he breathed, not as a king to a subject or a teacher to a student, but as a lonely soul who has finally found its missing piece. He offered his hand then, palm up, not in a kingly gesture, but in an offering, an invitation to a shared path. Ilara placed her hand in his. The connection was no longer a spark, but a steady, warm current, a river of understanding and promise flowing between them.
No kiss, no grand declaration, just this, a joining of hands, a meeting of eyes, and a silent vow made under the eternal trees. She had come to the Whispering Wood as an exile, unaware of the king who watched. She would stay as a guardian, a healer, and the beloved companion of a king who had forgotten how to hope, teaching him and the entire Sylvan Vale that even the oldest hearts could learn to bloom again. The seasons in the Whispering Wood did not change as they did in the mortal world. They flowed in cycles of light, the bright solace, the long dusk, the starfall rain, and the new green. A full cycle had passed since the Twin Moons Festival, and the Vale had undergone a quiet revolution. With Theron's faction dismantled and the blight eradicated, a new spirit breathed through the silver trees. Kaelin, inspired by Alara's bridge-building magic and her mortal perspective, began a cautious but deliberate policy of opening, not physically, the wards remained strong, but culturally. Selected Elven artisans, with Alara as their guide and translator, began limited trade of non-magical goods with trusted enclaves of humans in the bordering kingdoms. Stories, not of elven terror, but of elven beauty and wisdom, began to trickle back into the mortal world. In return, new ideas, new art forms, and a fresh, vital energy flowed into the Vale. Ilara was at the center of it all. She had undergone the harmony ritual with Master Alden and Kaelin officiating. It had been a profound, day-long ceremony deep in the heart of the Whispering Wood, where she had woven her life song with the ancient song of the forest. She hadn't become immortal, but her lifespan was now measured in centuries, not decades. She had chosen a path that would let her walk beside Kaelin for a long, meaningful age. Her magic flourished. Under Kaelin's tutelage, and with the Vale's full acceptance, she mastered arts that hadn't been seen in generations. She could now grow entire orchards overnight, not just for food, but designed to play wind music as the breeze passed through their specially shaped branches. She could heal not just plants, but the very spirit of a place, cleansing areas touched by sadness or conflict. She became known as the Root Singer, a title of deep respect. Her relationship with Kaelin was the foundation of her new life. It was built on profound mutual respect, shared purpose, and a deep, abiding affection that grew stronger every day. They were partners in every sense but one. They had not formally bonded in the Elven way. The connection was there, acknowledged by all, but they moved with a careful, deliberate slowness that was itself a form of reverence. Their love was expressed in shared silences watching the stars, in his patient corrections of her magical forms, in her gentle reminders to eat when he was lost in statecraft, in the way their hands would find each other when walking the paths. It was a halal love, pure in its intent and powerful in its restraint, a beacon of companionship that inspired the entire court. One evening, during the starfall rain when the sky was particularly vivid, they sat in their favorite spot, the now healed heart chamber of the living tower. The emerald cage was gone, the core pulsing with uninterrupted, healthy light. Lyra's ghost was at peace, her final task complete, but a sense of her gentle presence remained. The envoy from the Sunstone Dwarves arrives tomorrow. They wish to discuss renewing the old gem trade agreements. They were unsettled by the Theron incident. "I'll be there," Alara said, smiling. "I've been practicing my formal greetings in Dwarvish runespeak. I think I can manage welcome and please don't hit anything with your hammer without causing an incident." Kaelin chuckled, a rich, warm sound that still made her heart flutter. "Your diplomacy is as unconventional as your magic and twice as effective." He grew quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I look out at the Vale now, the new growth, the laughter in the glades, the children actually playing instead of practicing solemn dance dances, and I can barely remember the stagnant silence before. You did this, Ilara."
"We did this," she corrected firmly. "You had the courage to bring in the stone that caused the ripples. I just sang along with the water."
He looked at her, his silver eyes soft in the core's light. You are the water, my dear one, the fresh, life-giving spring that saved us all. The moment stretched, comfortable and deep. Then Kalen sat up straighter, a hint of uncharacteristic nervousness in his posture. There is something I have been meaning to discuss. With the veil secure and our path forward clear, there is a tradition, an old one, from before the isolation, when a king finds his heart's counterpart and wishes to unite their paths not just in life, but in duty and legacy. Alara's breath caught. She knew what this was, the royal bonding. It was more than a marriage. It was a magical and political union that would make her co-ruler, her voice equal to his in matters of state. Kalen, I'm not Elven. I wasn't raised for this. You were raised for kindness, he said, taking her hand, for healing, for seeing the potential for growth in barren soil. Those are the qualities the veil needs more than any pedigree of blood. You have already proven yourself its fiercest protector and its most beloved friend. He met her gaze, his own full of unwavering certainty. I am not asking you to become something you are not. I am asking you to stand beside me, as you already do, but with the title and authority that matches the reality. To be my queen, in all ways, for all the years we are granted. Tears of joy welled in Alara's eyes. This was the final full acceptance, not as a guest, not as a student, not even as a beloved companion, but as an equal, as family, made official. She thought of the exiled girl in the root hollow, unaware of the king watching over her. That girl could never have dreamed of this. Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion, 1,000 times yes. The bonding ceremony was set for the next cycle of the new green season, giving time for preparation and for invitations to be sent to their new allies among the dwarves and select human kingdoms. The veil erupted into a frenzy of joyful preparation, even more elaborate than the Twin Moons Festival. This was not just a celebration, it was a rebirth. As the day approached, Alara found herself drawn back to the very clearing where she had first slept. It was unchanged, the silver-barked tree's root hollow still there, a sacred spot to her now. She knelt and placed her hand on the moss. Thank you, she whispered to the forest, for the shelter, for the path, for bringing me home. The leaves above her rustled in a wind that touched nothing else, and a shower of luminous silver petals drifted down around her like a blessing. The whispering wood and its king had been waiting for her all along. The day of the royal bonding dawned clear and bright, the twin suns of the new green season casting a golden-green light over the vale. The Heartglade had been transformed into an amphitheater of living beauty. The aisles were lined with trees coaxed into arches of intertwined branches heavy with glowing blossoms. The seats were grown from fragrance-blooming shrubs, and at the far end, a dais had been formed from the living roots of the heart tree itself, pulsing with gentle light. The guests were a testament to the new era. There were dwarven thanes in polished stone armor, their beards braided with gems that winked in the light. There were human dignitaries from neighboring kingdoms, dressed in their finest, looking around with awe and a healthy hint of healthy fear. And of course, there were the elves, every single one from the Vale, their faces alight with a joy that had been absent for centuries. Alara stood in a bower near the dais, her heart a wild bird in her chest. Her bonding robes were a masterpiece. The underlayer was the deep green of the forest shadows, over which lay a gown woven from threads of living silver and moonbeam, created by the finest elven weavers and enchanted by Master Alvin himself. It moved like water and light. On her head was a delicate circlet of intertwined silver and living wood, set with a single radiant green stone that pulsed in time with her heartbeat, a gift from the heart tree. She looked every inch of a queen of a fairy tale, but she felt like a Lara of Oakhaven, deeply loved and finally home. Seraphis, now one of her staunchest supporters, adjusted a fold of her gown. "Breathe, Your Grace," she said, her emerald eyes warm. "You are not walking to a judgment, but to a celebration. The entire realm celebrates with you." Master Alden appeared, offering his arm.
"It is time, my child." She took his arm, and the great doors of woven vines parted. A hush fell over the immense gathering as she appeared. Then a sound rose, not applause, but a harmonious, wordless song from 1,000 elven throats, a blessing of pure sound that washed over her and made the tears she'd been holding back finally fall. She walked down the living aisle, Alden at her side. She saw the dwarves nodding in solemn approval. She saw the human envoys staring, their earlier tales of her now made manifest in breathtaking reality. She saw the elves, her people now, singing their hearts out for her. And at the end of the aisle, on the root dais, stood Kalen. He wore robes of midnight blue embroidered with constellations that seemed to actually move. His silver crown was on his brow, but his eyes were only for her. In them she saw 4 centuries of loneliness washed away by a tide of love and hope so powerful it shone from him like a star. She reached the dais. Alden placed her hand in Kalen's and stepped back. Their fingers intertwined, the connection immediate and profound, a completed circuit. The bonding ceremony was conducted by the eldest elf in the Vale, a being so ancient his voice was like the rustle of leaves. He spoke in the old language, the words resonating with magic. He spoke of union, of duty, of the blending of 2 spirits to strengthen one realm. He asked their vows. Kalen spoke first, his voice clear and strong, meant for all to hear. "I, Kalen of the Silver Crown, King of the Sylvan Vale, offer you my heart, my kingdom, and my eternal fidelity. I vow to honor your wisdom as my own, to cherish your spirit, and to walk with you through every season of light that is granted to us. Your joy shall be my crown, and your peace my throne." Then it was Alara's turn. She looked at Kalen, then at the gathered faces of 2 worlds watching. "I, Alara of Oakhaven, root singer and friend of the Whispering Wood, offer you my heart, my loyalty, and my mortal years made long by the grace of this land. I vow to stand beside you, to guard this vale with all my magic, and to bring the light of hope to every shadow. Your people shall be my people, and your home has become my own." The elder produced 2 rings, forged from a blend of elven silver and a piece of the purified heartstone, now cleansed and filled with light. As they exchanged them, a visible magic erupted. Ribbons of silver and green light spiraled up from their joined hands, weaving together into a brilliant double helix that shot upward into the canopy and then cascaded down like gentle rain over the entire glade, touching every guest with a sense of warmth, peace, and profound blessing. The bond was sealed. They were now in magic, law, and spirit, king and queen of the Sylvan Vale. The celebration that followed lasted for 3 days. There was feasting, music that made the stars dance, and displays of magic that left the mortal guests speechless. Alara and Kalen danced their first dance as bonded partners in the center of the glade, and it was as if they moved with one mind. As the final night waned, they stole away to their balcony, the same one where so many pivotal moments had occurred. The Vale slept below, peaceful and bright. "Queen Alara," Kalen said softly, testing the title. "It suits you." She leaned into his side, his arm around her shoulders. "It still feels like a dream. The girl who slept in the roots is now a queen." "That girl," Kalen said, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair, a chaste and loving gesture. A king was watching over her, and that king was waiting, though he did not know it, for his queen to awaken. They looked out over their kingdom, a realm saved by an exile's courage and a king's rediscovered heart. The Whispering Wood sang its ancient song around them, a lullaby of roots and starlight, of magic and memory, of a love that healed a kingdom and promised a future brighter than any they had dared to dream. And somewhere, in the deep, happy silence of the forest, the last dreamweaver's final dream of a reunited, thriving Vale was peacefully, completely, and joyfully fulfilled.